Hello, my name is Morgan and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to take photos with a full manual DSLR. Alright, so have you ever tried taking photos with a full manual DSLR? If you did, it probably looked horrible. Now, as a famous photographer once said, his name is Henry Carter, your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. Now, after taking that first disappointing photo, you probably resorted to taking the photo with your phone because it was easier. Now, phones don't compare to the beautiful, crisp, and clear and mesmerizing photos a DSLR can take. Also, taking these beautiful photos, you can make a little bit of side cash. Now, imagine that your cousin was going to have a wedding, and she wanted somebody to take photos for her wedding. And you volunteer, and she asks what you take photos with, and you say you take photos with your phone. She's probably going to turn you down and pay $500 to the professional photographer. But if you were to have had a DSLR and knew how to use it, she probably would have went with you and you could have taken some amazing photos and had $500 in your pocket. Now, I've been taking photos for about 3 years, and I'm also in a filmmaking and photography class at Calhoun. I know how hard it can be to take photos, but it gets easier. I remember going to photo shoots and taking 50 photos or so, and coming back with maybe 1 or 2 actually good photos. Now, if you keep trying, you'll get better. It just takes practice and repetition. You got to keep doing it over and over and tweaking your skills. Now, by informing you what a DSLR is, how you're going to actually use it, and how to check the photos that you've just taken, a quick fix to see what you've done wrong and to try to perfect it, I will teach you and make you one step closer to becoming a better photographer. Now, what is a DSLR? And how does it take amazing photos? Well, according to DSLR.com, DSLR stands for Digital Single Reflex Lens. Now, this can do many things. It's actually a lens that's apart from the camera, which is this right here. It actually can attach this. It can actually come apart from your camera. It can actually, you can change the lens that's connected to it, and also it has a larger sensor inside the camera that takes better quality photos than just normal cameras. In 1991, Kodak actually released the first DSLR camera, but it was mostly only used by photojournalists. It wasn't really used in the public as much. In about 2005, Canon released the EOS D5, which was actually used for consumers. Anybody could purchase them, and it was something that most everybody used as their first personal DSLR, which is actually pretty cool. Now that we have a better understanding with what a DSLR is, let's teach you how to learn one. Alright, well, when it comes to taking photos with a DSLR, there are 3 main settings that you have to worry about. The first setting is aperture, the second one is shutter speed, and the third one is your ISO. Now, your aperture is a small little door that opens up in a spiral, and it has this is probably the most complicated feature out of the 3 settings. Now, when it comes to taking photos with aperture, the wider you make the aperture, the more light is let into the camera, which in turn makes your photo brighter. The narrower that you have the opening, the less light is let in. Now, when it comes to letting in certain amounts of light, you don't want to let in too much light because it can cause your photo to become too bright to where you can't see anything. Now, you can also bring the aperture, make it wider, and it can also change the depth of field, like how blurry it would be behind me right now. So right now I have the aperture pretty narrow, which allows you to see what's behind me without it being blurred out and just showing what's focused on my body. Now, next we will talk about the shutter speed. The shutter speed is what can control how fast the camera actually takes the photo. Now, the shutter speed can vary just as well as the aperture, but it's a little less confusing. Now, the shutter speed, when it comes to that, the faster you make the shutter speed is the faster it takes the photo and how long the lens is actually exposed to what's in front of it. So all these settings can kind of come together, which you'll learn more when you hear about ISO as well. You kind of have to fine-tune them all together to get the perfect photo. Now with shutter speed, like I was saying earlier, the faster that you have the shutter speed, the faster that, or the little amount, there's less amount of light that actually goes into the lens. Now, when you are actually taking the photo, you can put it on a fast shutter speed when taking photos of people running or jumping, photos that have to do with sports. Now, you don't want a slow shutter speed because it'll cause them to blur like where their arms are. I know you've seen photos like that before, I'm sure. Now, to get the clear, crisp, like stop photos, you have to have a very fast shutter speed. But with a very fast shutter speed, the photo will actually be darker because you're letting in less light because of how fast it's open. Now, you can compensate with that by having a wider aperture and also an ISO, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, it's also good for night shots as well when it comes to shutter speed because when you're taking a night shot, you want to let more light into the lens because you don't want the photo to look dark, but you also don't want the lights to look, you don't want everything to look bad. So you can turn the shutter speed down really low, but it's recommended that you have a tripod because with a 10-second shutter speed, that means the camera's taking a photo for 10 seconds, which means if you were to walk across while taking that photo, there would be a streak of motion blur across where you had just walked across, which you may or may not want. It actually can look pretty cool if you add it in. Now, when it comes to ISO, that is how much light is let in to the sensor, but it's a little bit different. It's not really how much light is let into the sensor. It is really how much light the camera can create. It actually is somewhat like a fake amount of lighting. ISO is actually like a way to boost lights in low light situations, but it can look very unrealistic. It can make the lights around you and make the sharpness of the photo, it'll make everything seem a little less real. It'll look kind of fake almost. That's only with high ISO. You don't really have to worry about ISO messing up your photos unless you have it set extremely high. Now, it can look pretty cool and it can also help you in low light situations, but for the most part you don't want to run a high ISO because it can make the photo or lights look unrealistic and make your photo just not as sharp. Now finally, we've learned what each of the different settings do in the camera to perfect the photos we're taking. So now we're going to look at how going back and changing or editing these photos can help, or a quick fix to make sure the photos are right. Alright now, so let us take a look at how we're going to review the photos that we have taken. When reviewing your photos, it's best to have a computer handy because you can actually pull it up and kind of fine tune a little bit of things. But if you don't have one handy, you just have your camera, which is okay. Here's a quick way to figure out the most common problem. It's called noise. Now, noise, it can be caused by having too high of an ISO. Now, having a too high of an ISO can cause the photo to just be very pixelated. Now, the best way to check to make sure that it's not pixelated is to actually go into the settings on your phone or on your camera, and you can go to the picture and actually use the buttons on your camera to zoom in really close. And if you see a lot of pixelation behind your picture or on your picture, the ISO is probably turned up a little too much. Now, with that being said, I know I didn't state this earlier, but the main reason why a manual DSLR versus just a point and shoot one is good is because on a manual one you can actually fine tune things to make it look very perfect and nice. Now, on an automatic one, or just having it in auto mode, which everyone usually has, your photos can sometimes be too bright and too exposed, and sometimes you want it to be dark and kind of ominous, but you might not always get that in automatic mode. And in manual, you actually can learn how to fine tune it and make it look really good. Now, DSLR cameras have brought a whole new way of taking photos. I hope that I have given you a better understanding to what a DSLR is, how to take some photos with it, and also how you can review the photos to learn how to make sure that it looks a little bit better. Now, so next time you have a family member or somebody that's having a wedding or something special, you will have the tools to know how to go and take some pictures with a DSLR. They might not all be great, but at least they'll look better than if you were taking them with a phone. Thank you.